Well, hey everyone, Carrie Lapoli here, and welcome to another episode of the Diet Disruptors podcast. And I love doing this show because I get to week after week share stories of knowledge, because I always say when you know you can do, but also share stories of success and also share stories of, I don't know, moments that are not as successful, but as a result comes some really amazing learning. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So raise your hand for me virtually if you have ever had any stress. We're going to talk about stress today. And if you are watching this live, I love the way we do our podcast. It's very different than I think what most people do. We live stream our podcast with a video in our Diet Disruptors Squad, which is our free Facebook group that anybody can come in and join. We also stream it live in our Facebook page, in our YouTube channel. Just look for Disruptive Nutrition. But then we also bring it into our podcast so that you can listen to this. And what we try to do is make sure anything that we show on the screen, we also provide for you in the show notes. So if you have ever experienced stress, make sure if you are watching on a replay or live, write in the word stress. And so I'm going to guess that means like everybody is going to write the word stress. And the reason why I know that is because we're all going to experience stress. And it goes right along with why I will not give somebody just a food plan. Because stress is considered the X factor. Mark McDonald, who is the New York Times bestselling author of Body Confidence, is also one of our partners here and is just one of my very best friends in the world, who is really the father of PFC3, the approach that we use for eating and stabilizing our blood sugar. He is the first person that really talked about stress being the X factor. And I think that's such a telling way to describe it, because I'm sure if you at all wrote in stress, every single person could have done it. And stress becomes such a thing, like a buzzword, like it's just feels like it's inevitable and there's nothing we can do about it. And the bottom line is it really is the X factor in our health. So let me take a step back first, and then I'm going to explain. One of the things that we talk about at Disruptive Nutrition all the time are our 6 spinning plates. The 6 spinning plates are like these plates on poles. And like you go to a carnival or a circus or something. I haven't been to a circus in I don't know, probably 40 years, but let's just say you haven't. You can picture the people spinning those plates. Well, it's really interesting because as soon as one plate stops spinning, or doesn't stop spinning, but slows down, if that person notices that the plate isn't spinning, they're going to be able to kind of take their eye off another one for a little bit and get that one moving again. And very often, because you only have 2 hands and you got 6 spinning plates, once you get one plate spinning, other ones start to go too, right? And that's the metaphor for what we often teach, or what we teach at Disruptive Nutrition. Understanding that what our body needs is not just eat this, not that. It's not depriving yourself from food. We're a refuel as you go machine. But it isn't just food. Food, nutrition, and understanding blood sugar stabilization as a whole through our food is one of the 6 spinning plates. So what are the other ones? So nutrition, exercise, hydration. And notice I didn't just say water, because in our water doesn't always completely hydrate us. Sometimes we need electrolytes to do that, but that's another topic for another day. So we have nutrition, exercise, hydration, sleep, supplementation, and supplements could be things like electrolytes or vitamins or minerals, or supplemental kinds of therapies or approaches like a sauna or something like that, and stress. So stress is that 6th plate. And so many people think, yeah, well, I'm stressed. I mean, what am I going to do about it? As if we are a victim of stress. So what I want to do today, because it's truly the X factor, is I am going to blow your mind by proving how debilitating stress actually is. because something happened to me recently that caused me a lot of stress, and I have the actual proof of how it derailed my health. Are you ready to hear it? It's pretty cool and pretty telling. And I've been talking about stress as one of the six spinning plates for years and years and years and years and years. And yet I will have women or men that will say to me, I'm doing what you're telling me to do when it comes to food, and I'm working out, and I'm not seeing as much progress. And then I bring up stress, and then they blow it off. And then I bring it up again, and they blow it off again. And I think part of the problem is, yes, we know that it's an issue. We know it's there. We don't know just how debilitating it can be. But even more than that, we don't know what to do about it. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about what stress is, how it really truly is the X factor when it comes to all things nutrition, and it will absolutely prove to you why I will not just give you a meal plan and send you on your way, because I will do you a grave disservice. It's what all the diets do. Eat this, don't do that, this many calories, as if that's the magic formula, but that has nothing to do with the six spinning plates. And then, of course, mindset, our thoughts and our beliefs dictate our actions, and making sure that we have a lifestyle and systems and able to manage time to be able to do the things that we say we want to do with our lives and with our bodies. Okay, all of that has to come into play. But when it comes to stress, I'm going to show you exactly what I mean. And then we're going to talk about what you can do about it. So we got lots going on in this episode, and I'm really excited about it. So let's first talk about what stress is. Now, there's two kinds of stress. So if you're watching me live or on the replay, I want you to put in the number 2. And it's important to me because I actually, myself and my team, we have team Lindsay and Stephanie and Allie that are working all the time, looking at comments and responding, as I am as well. So put down the number 2, because we will check it. And this is a really great indication for us to know if you're paying attention. A little check for understanding. So 2 types of stress. We have acute stress, and then there's chronic stress. And gosh, in some ways they're unavoidable. We have to recognize that stress is going to be in our lives. But acute stress and chronic stress are very different. One kinds of saves, and the other really harms. So let's talk about what acute stress is. And acute stress, if we don't recognize it, can actually make us make some poor decisions, but it's there for a reason. But also, a lot of our insecurities sit there within the acute stress as well. So let's get into it. So acute stress will actually, it's that type of stress that it happens in a moment. It happens after a particular instance. So you might, it's sort of the same reaction. And kind of example is always used. Like if a bear comes out and you're like, whoa, right? That's stress on your body. That is a flash of a moment. And your body goes into this like fight or flight or freeze kind of a thing. And it's used to protect you. And that's the thing about our body. Weight gain is a symptom of health and hormones. If you're gaining weight, that is your body trying to protect you from blood sugar imbalances, from toxins, from all sorts of stuff. And it's doing that to try to balance your hormones. It's doing it. It's not going to work long term, right? And we get really annoyed by it, but it's all in an effort to love on you. And that's what happens when we have that acute stress. Boom. We actually get a shot of cortisol. And yes, I know people know that, right? Like they hear about cortisol, but do we really understand what that means? Well, cortisol directly impacts our glucose levels. Okay. And so when we get a shot of cortisol, our glucose levels are going to spike. Now, everything that we do in disruptive nutrition all stems from the foundation of blood sugar stabilization. We know it's the core of what every body needs. Our head coach, Coach Deb, talks about it as your body's love language. When your body is kind of doing this ebb and flow of consistent ripples where your blood glucose level is just coming along around between 80 and 120, if you actually were monitoring it, that's ideal. Now, our body can handle cortisol spikes, glucose spikes, carbs spike our blood sugar. That's why carbs get a bad rap, but we need carbs to give us energy and to fuel our brain. So that's why what we do is so powerful, because when we can pair protein with a carb and a fat, it can actually balance our blood sugar. There's a whole lot of science behind it. I'm not going to get into all of that right now because we're really talking about stress, but we call that eating PFC3. We eat every 3 hours of protein, fat, and carb. It's actually not about calorie counting or anything. It's actually about eating probably more food than what you've been eating, but about balancing so you can mitigate a blood sugar spike. Now, everybody reacts a little different to different types of foods, right? So it isn't necessarily like one size fits all, but generally speaking, we have a pretty good idea of what most foods do to most people and what happens when you pair them with protein and fat. Well, when you spike your cortisol, you're also going to get the same kind of glucose response as when you are overcarbing or when you're overeating. When we have a cortisol spike, our body gets all out of whack. We actually store fat because glucose comes into our system. Now, we can use glucose and we can use it in our muscles and in our liver, and that's a good thing. That's exactly where we want it. But anything excess, it actually gets stored in our fat cells. And it's called glycation. We will also age faster. So people that are under chronic stress are likely aging faster because of the cortisol spikes. We'll get into that. But glycation through food or through chronic stress or through a variety of other things, that causes us to age faster. It causes us to put ourselves at risk for every metabolic disease. And that's the cause of weight gain, not that you're eating too much. Okay? So it's super, super important. Now, when we have acute stress, we'll get that cortisol spike and our body will respond accordingly. But when we're healthy, our body will also release insulin when we have that to to bring down that cortisol spike. But if we are going through that acute stress, our body is well equipped, especially because if we're not diabetic, to be able to handle that insulin release. The problem is so often, more than half of the people right now in our country are pre-diabetic or insulin resistant, and that's all because of our glucose spiking more and more and more than it should, often because of food and a lot because of stress. So acute stress is there to actually help us. Chronic stress is stress that is much more debilitating because it happens over a longer period of time. So when you have this chronic stress where there's just either a lot going on, now I know people that have a lot going on, and that doesn't automatically mean stress. I just did a whole coaching call with our members about this. Overwhelmed does not necessarily equal chronic stress. Sometimes we automatically think it does, but our mindsets around stress are a big part of stress, right? The minute we're uncomfortable or the minute we feel overwhelmed. Now, there's also chronic stress because of trauma and all sorts of PTSD that is debilitating, because that means our cortisol levels are constantly up, right? Acute stress means they'll come up and then they'll come down. But because chronic stress is where that stress level is so high more often than not, and then if we're not balancing it with our food and we're just shooting that up higher, it will wreak havoc on our body, and your body will not release weight. Now, some of you might say, well, I was on a diet before and I was able to release weight even though I was under a lot of stress. Well, if you just don't eat when you're on a diet or restrict calories or intermittent fast or don't have carbs or whatever, your body will release weight just to your set point. Your set point is like your thermostat. So if your house is set at 70 degrees, your air conditioner will kick on if it's 78, but it will stop at 70. The more and more you diet, the higher and higher your set point is, and the less and less effective for weight loss dieting will be. And it's never effective for getting to your optimal health. So when we have that chronic stress, think about your cortisol levels as being heightened a lot. And now your body is constantly trying to release insulin to be able to mitigate that spike. And this is when very, very often insulin resistance comes in. And you can have people say, how is that possible? Like, it's not even like that I eat that crazy. If you have a lot of chronic stress and you're trying to eat healthy, you probably are not eating to necessarily balance your blood sugar. But even if you are, you're not going to gain weight, but you're likely going to have a hard time losing it. So you have acute stress as well as chronic stress. Now, all of that chronic stress can actually also wreak havoc as a byproduct of the cortisol spikes on a weakened as a weakened immune system. Now, the more we glycate, either because of food, because we don't know how to balance our blood sugar, or because of the stress on a regular basis. Every time we glycate, we actually weaken our immune system. We cause inflammation. We release free radicals into our body, which are like little lightning bolts that zap our cells. And that is the root cause of all sorts of metabolic disease, including stroke and cancer and diabetes and heart disease and high cholesterol and all of those things. Anxiety and depression fall right in line with that. So when I say the root cause of everything is blood sugar stabilization, I mean it. So when people come in and say, oh, I've heard about blood sugar stabilization so I can lose weight. Nope. We want to have blood sugar stabilization so we can have hormonal balance. Our body can be in homeostasis, and that will help us with every single thing that we want, including weight loss. But when we just go for weight loss, we're going to go down a rabbit hole. So I'm going to share my screen because here's what's so cool. That's a little bit about stress. Now, I'm going to prove to you how debilitating stress can be. And I'm going to prove to you how it impacts our blood sugar. Because a lot of people just think, yeah, I hear about that, but they don't actually see it in action. Well, I am wearing a continuous glucose monitor right on my arm, and it allows me to be able to track my glucose levels in real time. I don't do this all the time because as somebody that had disordered eating for a very long time, I have done lots of different continuous glucose monitors, and some more successfully than others. Some made me really obsess a little bit about food, and that was really problematic for me. The continuous glucose monitor that I choose, and I have worked with a lot and have worked with the companies to see where their philosophies are. The one I choose to use is called Signos. But we have I've been able to meet with the CEO and understand their philosophy around optimal health. And what I love about this continuous glucose monitor is I don't have to scan my phone to be able to get the data. It's continuously going. So there was a Saturday very recently where I was under a tremendous amount of stress. I had been traveling that week before. I flew home on Friday. On Friday morning, I was in North Carolina. And then that evening was prom. My junior daughter was at prom, as well as our exchange student who's a junior. And they wanted to have pre-prom pictures at our house. We had 250 plus people at our house. I landed at about noon in New York City, had to get my butt up to Connecticut, and I was home with traffic and all of that just before I had literally our street closed down because there were so many people. But that really wasn't what stressed me out. That was kind of exciting for me, but there was a little stress around getting there on time. And I could feel it. It was so interesting. I could feel it in my chest. I could feel unsettled. But when I actually every single morning, I do my morning time, I do an evening routine. This is a lot of what we talk about with a healthy lifestyle, is being reflective and self-aware. And I just kept asking myself, why am I feeling so much anxiety and stress right now? And we're going through a lot right now in our own home. We're moving and we're building a house, and I'm running 2 businesses, and there's just a lot happening. My daughter is graduating high school and going to college. And we knew that this trip that I was going on in North Carolina was sort of going to be this starting point for all these changes that were going to be happening in our lives and all these things that we needed to do. And I think subconsciously it really got to me. So it wasn't one thing that happened, like a bear jumped out at me. And it wasn't necessarily chronic stress, because I started to implement some of the things that I'm going to tell you about, and I started to feel a lot better. It wasn't based in trauma, but it was based on, in the moment, a lot of acute stress. Okay. So I'm going to actually share my screen, and I'm going to show you a screenshot from that Saturday after the prom pictures, because it was telling. I could not relax all day. So if you take a look at this was my data from Saturday. Now, those of you that are listening on the podcast, don't worry, I'm going to explain this to you. So there is a purple bar that basically says it's my optimal range for being at my optimal health. And your goal is really to be able to be in range as much as possible. Now, you can see when I was sleeping, I woke up just before 6:00 in the morning, and I do my morning time, and I was, ready for the day. But as I continued and sort of woke up a little bit more, I could feel the anxiety and the stress of everything we had to do. And it was interesting because it was a Saturday and I try not to work on Saturdays. And so it meant there was a whole lot to do with getting our house ready to sell it and everything else with my daughter and a whole lot of things. And slowly but slowly, look at this. I literally kept going in the red all day long. My food, and I just either took pictures or wrote a note of the food that I had, was completely PFC balanced and clean because I knew I was having these stress spikes. I had it in real time telling me I knew that if I stress ate, I was going to spike way higher. Now, these spikes aren't they're not debilitating by any stretch of the imagination, but on average, I am able to stay within the purple about 80 to 90% of my day. And so to see that basically all day I was in the red, even though I was eating on point. And at 3 o'clock, I finally was like, I got to get my butt moving because we know one way to mitigate a blood sugar spike is to move, even just going for a walk. Well, I went on a Peloton Tabata ride and I went for 20 minutes and I rode hard. And I mean, look what happened after it. I leveled out a little bit and then there was some stressful stuff that happened and boom, it just went up again. And this is telling me right here, I was eating on point. I exercised. I drank my water. I did all of those things. And yet I couldn't mitigate that spike throughout the day. And so for those people that feel like either they're not making progress fast enough or I just can't lose this weight and you got to make sure your plates are spinning. The X factor is stress because now I could feel it in my chest, but I will tell you very often, you're not necessarily going to always know it's there, right? And so we have to be aware that it is potentially very, very real. But when you know you're stressed and you know that this is happening, like for me, I feel it right in my chest. I have to take a deep breath. And that definitely feels better. But that physical reaction, I don't need a glucose monitor to tell me what's happening right now. I know my cortisol is spiked. So in the old days, when I was the unhealthy, unbalanced Carrie, I would have used that as an absolute excuse to binge eat, to stress eat. But now that I know so much more about my body and knowing that this is I'm already heightened, any food I'm eating is going to heighten more, but I couldn't not eat food. I had to keep my body fueled. If I just chose not to eat because I was stressed or because I was trying to bring down my blood sugar, that would cause more damage. The nutrients, the fat, the protein, the carbs are all needed to keep my brain functioning, right? If you've ever not eaten and you get hangry, you're not going to function well. That's going to cause more stress. So it's really important to see how incredible this is and how if I just gave you a food plan and told you how to eat PFC and didn't show you all the spinning plates and how to mitigate stress, as well as to deal with your mindsets, which is often very much contributing to the stress, as well as how to live a lifestyle that is going to keep you from stressing as much as it might normally to be able to handle when life throws chaos at you. If I just gave you a meal plan and didn't show you the rest of that, you would say disruptive nutrition doesn't work and go look for something else. And that's what keeps me up at night. You would say PFC3 doesn't work. I try it and I'm not able to do it. Well, that's why you're not ever going to see, here is a one pager on how to eat PFC3. If I can't do it right with you, I don't want to do it. But that's why this podcast is so important because I know everybody's not going to be able to work with us. I can't even work with everybody. I have a cap. We can't bring in any more than 15 to 20 people a month. And we talk to over 200 a month. So we got to be able to give you strategies. I can't be like, oh, sorry, we can't help you. I want to teach you. I want to educate you and I want to empower you. So if we can't work with you, you still have the tools to be able to be successful. So let's talk about some stress strategies that can slay your body's X factor, right? So one of the first ones is exactly what I've been talking about, eating PFC3. That is what I did when I saw that. I knew I had to stay on point. I knew that that was not the time for what I call an appreciation meal. I love a good appreciation meal when I go out for dinner, eat anything I want, and so truly appreciate it. My blood sugar is going to spike. It totally will, but it's completely worth it because A, my body is strong and healthy and it can totally handle that. But B, my body isn't tired from trying to constantly balance its blood sugar on its own. But eating PFC3, a protein, fat, and carb every 3 hours, and trying to keep the food as clean as possible without processed, but more whole foods and lighter, dense carbs like fruit. A lot of people on keto are like, fruit? Oh my gosh, yes, you can have fruits. And when you have that with protein, it's just so nourishing. Lots of vegetables. It's amazing what that can do to you. And I mean, when you have low blood sugar, right? You know how cranky you are. It's the same kind of thing. You don't want to get that low blood sugar. You're going to have that cortisol spike, but the answer is not to not eat. Now, if you're focused on understanding who you are and your own self-awareness, remember, I was talking about like that feeling in my chest. That's another piece of this. So self-awareness is a huge piece of managing your stress. When you understand more about your personality, about your triggers, about the things that set you off, then you absolutely can manage that. We do a ton of that work with our clients in disruptive nutrition, but you can be starting with some reflective journaling. You can start, and we don't do a lot of journaling because we have a lot of other tools, but that's a great task for you to do if you're working on this on your own. Affirmations. That's really huge because when you affirm something that you want to be true, it's actually like your brain filters that information out and says, oh, that's what we're doing now? Oh, okay. And there's actually a reaction in your brain to start focusing on that more. Okay. So self-aware. Also, when you're really struggling with something, you can become that really self-aware and say, okay, what's triggering me? Why am I so stressed right now? Those things really matter. Okay. Identifying the source of your stress. So this is number 3. So first is PFC. Second is that level of self-awareness. 3 is identifying the source. I write this down on my planner pad all the time. Every morning I have our disruptive nutrition planner pad, and I wrote down, and I did this for a few days, especially when I had this high level of stress, what exactly is causing me the anxiety? And if you can take like an onion, you know how you peel an onion and you just get peeling back the layers and say, I'm stressed about work. Okay, what about work? Well, I'm stressed that my boss is going to be in and I don't think he likes me. Well, why do you think he doesn't like you, right? You can have this inner kind of conversation with yourself. So really get to the root cause, because then you realize, oh, this is actually what it is. And then you could release some of it from the other places. Practice relaxation techniques. That's the 4th one. Now, I love yoga, and I started to do that more and more. And I mean, honestly, like a regular yoga practice is huge. Now, this week that led up to my Saturday, I was traveling. I did not work out. I worked out Monday. My exchange student on Tuesday had an accident and I had to go into urgent care on Tuesday. So I didn't work out. And of course, that was stressful. And then I was traveling Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and was not moving my body. Relaxation techniques like yoga is huge, as well as exercise. So that's 4 and 5. So relaxation techniques like yoga, breathing, meditation, but not like I couldn't do anything. I tried all of that on those days. That day I was super stressed. It's got to be proactive. It's got to be at a time when you're not stressed and doing it on a regular basis, that your body's going to be able to handle the stress when something stressful does come up, right? I didn't even have enough kind of wherewithal in the moment on that whole day on Saturday to really bring myself to where I needed to go. I had just had too much anxiety to do all of those things. But moving your body every day at 7 o'clock is when I work out. And again, I didn't work out that whole week. And that impacts my body to be able to handle the stress and mitigate a glucose spike. Because if I'm not working out on a regular basis, when I do have that spike, it's harder for my body to be able to mitigate it. Sleep. Sleep is huge. It's one of your spinning plates. But when you don't get enough sleep, you stress. When you stress, you don't get enough sleep, right? So I highly suggest the book Sleep Smarter by Sean Stevenson. So many great opportunities for you to learn how to get better sleep. One that I'll tell you right now, cool, dark room. Get rid of your phone or blue light by at least an hour before you go to bed. Have a half of a PFC meal before you, like an hour before you go to bed or half an hour before you go to bed. I'm telling you, all those things are going to sleep better, and that's going to help your stress. Connecting with others. So here's one of the things that's super important. All of our stress, all of our anxiety lives really in the right side of our brain. Okay. The right side of our brain is our creative side. It's messy. But when we can talk to somebody, this is why therapy is so important. But when we can talk to somebody about what's going on, it takes it and it moves it from the right side to the left side. And when it moves it to the left side of the brain, it becomes our problem solving side of the brain. And just by talking about it, you will start to release some of that stress and start to problem solve. And it's amazing. We talk about 1% all the time. If you can start to problem solve just 1% at a time, it's amazing how much better that makes you feel. So, do you have a friend to talk to about it? Do you have a therapist? Do you have just somebody that you trust? And if you don't have any of those, you can do it to yourself. You can say out loud the things. If you've ever said, wow, that sounds different when I say it out loud than when I said it in my head, that's because it does, because you're now activating the problem solving side of your brain. And then I will never value and just tell you how important it is. And I cannot state this enough. Seeking help, professional medical professionals around stress, anxiety, therapy, counseling, life coaching. As a certified life coach, it's one of the big things that I want to make sure that I get into when we're talking to clients. Seek that professional help. And that's one of the things with disruptive nutrition that I know has been so helpful for so many women, that we can kind of get into all of these things and be able to work on this. So even if you're not working with us, getting that professional type of support or therapy is an important way to be able to mitigate that stress, because it isn't just inconvenient, but that stress will often lead to fear and will keep you from doing the things in life that you were meant to do. We were all here on this earth for a purpose. It wasn't to find the right diet, and it wasn't to stress about things that we don't have control on. It was to live a life of purpose that is uniquely yours to live. And so stress truly is the X factor on holding us back in our health and in our life. So I'm hoping that today you understand a little bit more about what stress is, acute and chronic stress, and my proof that it actually will derail your goals, whether you're trying to lose weight or get healthy, whether you're trying to die younger later like I am, where you want to slow down the age train, whether you're trying to avoid metabolic disease like diabetes and stroke, whether you're trying to keep your body healthy and strong because you eat clean. But if you have that stress, those free radicals are coming in your body anyway, because of the cortisol spike and the glucose levels that are rising. Every time we glycate, it's doing all sorts of damage and wreaking havoc. So it's important to work on stress, but don't stress out about working on stress, because that's just going to cause more stress. 1% at a time, recognizing that any of these things that we just talked about, learning how to eat PFC, focusing on yourself and getting more self-aware, identifying the source or the triggers of your stress, relaxation techniques, moving your body. Strength training is one of the best things we can do. Getting enough sleep, connecting with others, moving it from the right brain to the left brain, and seeking professional help. All of those things matter. I want to know, what is one thing you're going to do today to mitigate that level of stress? So even though you might have a lot of it, that acute stress can cause chronic stress, and it can lead to chronic stress, and that is going to be the X factor for you. So what are you going to do today to be able to just 1% make progress towards alleviating some of that stress? I want to hear about this. I hope that this has been helpful for you. I want to hear your takeaways. Thanks.